I want you to picture something. It is early morning. A U.S. submarine, running silent, running deep somewhere in the Indian Ocean, locks onto a target. The crew has been tracking this ship for days. The Iranian destroyer Soleimani, named after the IRGC general the U.S. killed back in January 2020, has been hiding near the Sri Lankan coast, roughly 2,400 miles from the Persian Gulf. Its captain apparently figured that distance meant safety. He was wrong. What happened next was the first confirmed torpedo kill by a U.S. Navy submarine since the final months of World War II. We are talking about an 80-year gap, closed on a Tuesday morning in March of 2026. And unlike most military events, we have the actual footage, released by Central Command within hours. I've spent the last 48 hours going through every frame of that footage, the official press briefings, and the satellite imagery coming out of Iran's southern ports. What I found is a story that goes far beyond one torpedo, because the Soleimani wasn't alone in going down. It was just the last one left to sink. Let me back up to how we got here, because the context is everything. Operation Epic Fury began hours after Israeli forces assassinated Supreme Leader Khamenei, an event that, frankly, most Western analysts had assessed as a low-probability scenario, even as recently as the February 2026 IAEA reporting cycle. When it happened, the US and Israel had apparently pre-coordinated an immediate kinetic response to neutralize Iran's ability to retaliate from the sea. The Iranian Navy, or what was left of it, never really got a shot off. I want to show you the satellite imagery from Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval installation on the Strait of Hormuz. In the before image, you can count the vessels. In the after image, taken within 12 hours of the operation starting, you can see fire damage across the entire pier. The flagship of Iran's support fleet, the Irish Macron, AE, converted oil tanker Iran had repurposed as a floating forward base, never moved. It didn't even attempt to leave port. The Tomahawk strikes came faster than the crew could respond. Admiral Brad Cooper, commanding U.S. Central Command, confirmed in his briefing that destroying Iran's naval capability was one of the first phase priorities. The numbers back that up. Over 20 Iranian naval vessels destroyed, including one submarine, which, when you understand that Iran only operates a handful of Kilo-class and midget submarines, represents a catastrophic loss of their underwater deterrent. But here's the part I keep coming back to. Iran tried to spin this. Now, I get a lot of comments asking why I spend time on Iranian state propaganda. The answer is simple. Because the lie tells you what the liar is scared of. Within hours of Operation Epic Fury beginning, Iranian state media was circulating claims that 4 ballistic missiles had sunk the USS Abraham Lincoln, one of the U.S. Navy's Nimitz-class carriers, a 100,000-ton vessel operating as part of the Lincoln Strike Group in the region. This claim was, to put it charitably, fiction. Central Command's response was direct. The only carrier that had been struck was the Saeed Bagheri, Iran's own drone carrier, the one they'd been quietly developing as their answer to US carrier dominance. And they even released a propaganda video of it before it went down, apparently trying to demonstrate the Mohair 6 drone capability to a domestic audience. I watched that video. It's oddly poignant. You can see Iranian engineers clearly proud of what they built. The runway is 185 meters. The elevator system for deck operations looks functional. It was genuinely not a nothing program. And now it's sitting at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. What strikes me about this, and I said something similar after the 2024 Houthi Red Sea operations, is that Iran has consistently built military hardware for the world it imagined, not the world it was actually fighting in. The Saeed Bagheri made sense against a peer that couldn't contest air superiority. against a U.S. strike package that had already suppressed Iran's integrated air defense within the first 90 minutes, it was a liability the moment the operation started. Here's the data point I want everyone to focus on, because I think it matters more than any single vessel sinking. On day 1 of the operation, Iran fired approximately 350 theater ballistic missiles. By day 2, that number had halved to roughly 175. Day 3 saw further attrition to around 120. General Dan Kane confirmed in Thursday's press conference an 86% reduction in ballistic missile launches from opening day, with a 23% drop in just the most recent 24-hour window. One-way attack drones, the asymmetric tool Iran had been leaning on heavily since 2023, were down 73% from peak. Now, there's a theory circulating, mostly from Iranian-adjacent analysts, that this decline isn't depletion. Their argument is that Iran has identified a pattern. Every time they launch, US and Israeli surveillance assets locate the launcher within minutes and destroy it before it can relocate. So, according to this theory, Iran is pausing deliberately, waiting to blind the surveillance network before resuming at full capacity. I've thought about this carefully, and I don't buy it. Here's why. If Iran had an effective counter-surveillance capability, if they could meaningfully degrade American and Israeli ISR assets, we would have already seen evidence of it in the engagement data. We haven't. Coalition aircraft losses remain near zero. Drone losses are minimal, and at least some of those appear to be mechanical failures, not shoot-downs. Iran isn't holding back a capability. They're running out of a resource. That resource is either the missiles themselves, or more precisely, the launch infrastructure. Launchers are hard to hide and hard to replace. Shahab 3 launcher isn't something you rebuild in a week. The 86% decline in ballistic launches looks less like strategic patience and more like what happens when a country has burned through the majority of its mobile launcher fleet. I want to be careful here because a lot of channels are going to tell you this is over and Iran is finished. I don't think that's the right read. The map from Thursday's briefing showed something important. The US and Israel have divided operational responsibilities in a way that reveals something about the endgame. Israel is hitting western Iran, government buildings, IRGC command nodes, police headquarters, intelligence facilities. These are the targets you go after if you're thinking about post-conflict internal Iranian politics. If mass protests emerge, like the Masa Amini movement in 2022, but potentially larger and better armed, you want Iran's security apparatus fractured before that happens. The US, meanwhile, is focused on the South, drone manufacturing, naval infrastructure, ballistic missile production. This is attrition targeting. You're not trying to change the government. You're trying to ensure that whatever government emerges can't threaten the Strait of Hormuz for the next decade. Those are two very different theories of victory operating simultaneously, and they don't fully align. That tension between Israel's political objectives and America's military strategic ones is the story I'll be watching closely over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Because once the shooting slows down, the disagreements about what winning actually looks like are going to surface fast. So here's where I land. The Iranian Navy as an operational force is gone for the foreseeable future. Not years, we're potentially talking decades, depending on what the post-Khamenei political environment allows in terms of reconstruction and defense spending. The ballistic missile program has been degraded, significantly, though not eliminated. Iran still has underground facilities, and if even a fraction of the launcher fleet survived dispersed, they retain some residual capability. The more interesting question, the one nobody is asking loudly enough yet, is what happens to Iran's nuclear program. The sites at Fordow and Natanz have not, as of this briefing, been primary targets. That changes the calculus significantly, and if the post-Khamenei succession produces a hardline faction that decides conventional deterrence has now failed completely, and the only remaining option is to sprint toward a weapon. That's the scenario that makes everything we watch this week feel like a prequel. I'll be covering that as it develops. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I called the Red Sea escalation in November 2023, about 6 weeks before it became mainstream news. I'm not saying I have a crystal ball. I just read the primary sources slowly and disagree with the consensus when the evidence points somewhere different. If that's the kind of analysis you're here for, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.